Okay.
I like to talk, you know.
It's good. That's what a conference is for. So, Tháıdene Australia, Sazi Kyle Napier Bachanastur, and I'm here co-presenting with Eileen Beaver, who is Tháıdene, who is my friend and language and culture consultant and elder mentor. And we'll talk about the mentor apprentice program and our roles in that.
And my name's Eileen Beaver. I am Dene in Cree. I I do a lot of different works in trying to keep the language and culture alive, especially the Dene Tháıdene and the Cree and the Dene culture and language. In the Northwest Territories and all over Canada, now that it seems that I'm spreading my wings into different provinces too.
The content and order of our presentation is we're going to give very brief introductions about ourselves. We're going to talk about the orthographic history of Dene Yatı. We're going to talk a little bit about some collaborative work that Eileen and I did, which ended up being the result of the thesis, sorry, my master's thesis, which Eileen was the elder mentor and supervisor of. And then we're going to end the conversation here, or we're going to open up the conversation by showing some examples of how fonts or typographies or orthographies have affected Dene Yatı and our ability to write in our language.
Hi, my name's Eileen Beaver. I'm Dene in Cree, treaty with Métis descent. I was born in Yellowknife, and I lived in the territories most of my life. I'm a member of Salt River First Nation through marriage to my husband, Henry Beaver. I currently, I'm a current speaker of Dene Yatı, some Cree, not too fluent anymore, and English. I also did speak Gaelic, French, Michif, Cree, Dene Yatı, and Latin in the church before I learned to speak English at the age of 9. I taught in the Dene Yatı language for more than like 15, possibly even more years, but as a teacher, I taught in both in the elementary and the high school. I taught, no matter what I do, I always seem to go back into language, the Dene language or the Aboriginal language and cultural. So therefore, I call myself the language and cultural fire keeper.
So I've been a learner of Dene Yatı because of Eileen connecting me to my ancestral languages in that way. So I've only started learning in the last maybe year and a half or 2 years, and that's because of Eileen. And so, but I have been a long time advocate for Indigenous language revitalization, especially for the languages of my lineage. So all of the different work roles that I currently fulfill, namely revolve around either sound production, digital technologies, or Indigenous language revitalization. I'm also vice chair for Native Land Digital, which a lot of people have heard of. It's one of the most well-known Indigenous mapping websites or resources that people use. So you'll see an example of that in the presentation as well. And then Eileen, if you don't mind talking very briefly about when the elders came together to standardize DRO in 1990.
Yes, I think it was in 1999. We had not had any standardized Dene Roman orthography or any way although through the years that teachers taught within the classroom, um, the elders decided that because the elders only spoke in syllabics that had characters that had the Dene Roman orthography sounds, they chose to do the Dene Roman orthography, and put that together so that we had our structure on how to read and write in the Dene Yatı. And this is they came up with talking about how the English Roman orthography was what the students had learned, and so they may be able to connect with that, and that's how they started to develop the Dene or Dene Roman orthography, and that started in 1999. The Dene Yatı and Dene Yatı has started to change because of the interruptions that were happening. In the Dene Yatı, we speak with a T dialect, and in the Dene they have a different dialect, either a K dialect or in Alberta, I think they also have a K, and further in Manitoba, and that is they also have a Dene and they have a different dialect, and so
so the type of work that Eileen did with relation to the thesis that we had done, which is Tháıdene Yatı Hóneneltën, which means like the old people's way of speaking and learning and relating. And so the types of work, like how we conducted our work, was through Dene epistemologies, Dene research methodologies, making sure that we were giving back as much as we were taking, and that anyone who was involved in the work had an opportunity to review and edit the work before it was released. Eileen, I think you've read it 3 times, and it was 230 pages. So yeah, so Masi Cho for that. Thank you so much for your work and help there. So Eileen, here's an example of the of Dene Roman orthography on the right, all of the letters that are in our language. And then you've mentioned a few different letters that are not in Dene Roman orthography.
Yes, there are 46 characters, and each consonant and vowel has its own symbol and sound. So for every consonant vowel, they have their own symbol and sound. In this case, in the English part, there's 26 characters, and in the Dene, I think there are 41, 46. And one of the things that they don't have is the C, which is because in English you have the C sound, sounding like Caesar and cat, and we have the S and the K sound, so they didn't take the C, but they did take the CH and the CH sharp. The other one is an F sound. They don't have an F sound in the Dene Roman orthography, but they do have it in syllabics. They don't have the P and Q in the Dene Roman orthography because our languages, our B's are more like a P sound, and the Q is the KW sound, que. So they don't have that, and then there's the other one, that V. They don't have it in the Dene Roman orthography, but they do have it in the syllabics, simply for the religious when they translating religious, like Ave and different things like that. And so each of our characters, we have glottal stops, we have glottal sounds, we have high pitch, sharp sounds, but every one of them, and we also have single vowel, consonant vowel, double consonant vowel, and triple consonant vowel sounds. Like every consonant sound has to have a vowel, unless it's in the middle or it's not with. So yeah, to learn the Dene Roman orthography, you have to memorize a lot of sounds and symbols. Oops.
Now, speaking of developing a typography in the late 90s, do you mind talking about how having an orthography, like an agreed upon, an agreed upon uniform orthography affected people's ability to like speak or read or learn in the language?
Once the orthography was developed, the language vitality seemed to also continue to change in the different areas and where the Aboriginal teachers were reading and writing, because they were just learning how to read and write within the Dene Roman orthography. And many of them had spoken the Dene in like short form, and they had to learn the long form. And so in that way, that contributed a lot to the actual teachings from Dene Tetlin Yatı into making it similar to Dene Sonlin Yatı. Yeah, because the syllabics didn't have any of the Dene Roman orthography underneath to show it was like a hit and miss. So if you wanted to teach in the Dene Roman orthography and syllabics, then you were teaching to a point where each of the symbols didn't have a guidance of the Dene Roman orthography at the bottom to say what the sound was. And so it was just as what you see in the chart here. You didn't see at the end, like here you have and then how the symbols go up and down and that, and a lot of the languages have the same letters, but with different Dene Roman orthography with different high, like regular tone, high tone, nasal tone, high and nasal, and the word becomes a different meaning. And so when so that was the main reason why the elders had decided to teach the Dene Roman orthography instead of syllabics, because they didn't want the vitality of the language, the Dene language, to be too too badly affected and confusing, while everybody was just learning how to read and write.
And so in meeting the demands for language, like resource creators, technologies have had to change along the way, but often those technologies have favored English kind of font or typographies and orthographies over Indigenous languages or non-English fonts. So with the emergence of each new technology, English gets the first kick at the can, and then other languages follow a few years after, generally through the work of passionate nerds and language advocates.
Yes, we created, I've actually, throughout the years of teaching in the high school, and that we have to develop our own resources. We have to develop our own charts. We have to develop our own everything that right down to the Dene Roman orthography and so what we did was, as you can see in this picture here, we call the dictionary called the Ritlicho. That book goes along really well with the game that we did in Paul Bushy and I. We talked about how they have the Scrabble game. So it really helped within the schools. Not only that too, it also helps make you critically think, whether you're from emergent to capable of or fluent speaker become a fluent speaker.
I really want to play this game with you. Like you said, you can get it at the SSDC. I want to.
Yeah,
That'd be fun to play.
they're on sale, and it also helps with our language, promoting our language, and to build more resources.
So for digitalized versions of the language where it's not handwritten or typed, you need to have programs which can read Unicode. So generally your more accessible programs, Microsoft Suite, or any program which allows you to write in languages which use symbols outside of standard Roman orthography, that's usually a Unicode enabled technology. So here you see more examples of the vowels in Dene, Detlane, Yatı. You see the glottal, the bar L. And so in order to have these effectively communicated in digital space, the program needs to be Unicode enabled. So anyone who's listening who's digitally or technologically oriented, which I imagine is most of the folks in the audience, I strongly recommend ensuring language accessibility so that those who are communicating in their language can do so.
Also, if I can just say, if you have a smartphone or Apple, the Unicode and first voices really helps. But if you're on a Samsung and you're on an app, you don't have that access. You have to follow just what's on the vowels, like by pressing it. Like whereas you see here in our language, like you remember, we're talking to each other. This is yours though. Eh? So like here we're talking, I'm in the green and you are in the black. And so when I'm talking and I want to write to you, I have to press the vowels to get the right symbol. And on certain, I think it's an I, which we call an E, we don't have a nasal on that. So we don't, like, you know, instead it has more for the clinchon, and they have the low for like we have nasal, there's a hook at the end of the vowel, at the end of the vowel, and their low tone is the character that goes slanted. What do you call it? It goes the other way to show that it's a low tone. And so if you're speaking Slavian Dogub, your ability to read and write in the language could be there. But if you're looking in Dene, then it's not there. You want to talk more on this one here?
Sure, yeah. I just wanted to give shout outs to Chris Harvey, who is a well-known digital technologist who actually created the first voices Dene font here that Eileen and I are using to communicate. So again, to those nerds and techies that might be watching, here's the benefit of language accessibility, is that Eileen and I can now write to each other in the language. And then one last example is that Eileen and I are also working on a video game. This is not a view of what the game itself looks like, but this is some of the back-end code. So you see a full conversation here happening with different options and things like that. And that's because the engine that we're using to create the game, RPG Maker MV, allows for Unicode, which means that that we can create games, resources, we can create contemporary digital technologies that allow for options and interactive engagement and dialogue, that where we can represent ourselves in the language, and really speaking to the importance of typographies and undoing the typographies of man. So thanks again for everyone, Masicho, for everyone that came out, and Tháıdene.
Marci, don Tanyas TC Serin Tháıdene. Dene Yatı Eileen Marci Nistan Tháıdene. Nan Nist Inlasa. Nahalyas Natlilasa. I'm saying that if you speak the language, thank you for listening, and I may see you again, and I may talk with you again one day. May you live long.
Hey. Kunen Nonesti Hosa.